Okay, in Chapter 8, we're going to go over other confined space hazards that you will find. So we'll explain some other hazards related to the permit required confined space, learn the nature of the exposure, and for other identified or suspected hazards in the permit required confined space, and differentiate between physical and health hazards. So when you're doing your evaluation of the different hazards, it's going to help you with a certain amount of things. It's going to help you know what you're going to come against physically or health-wise, and then it's also going to help you figure out what kind of controls you're going to need, including what PPE that the worker should wear. So some of the general ones could be electrical engulfment, mechanical entrapment, and the nature of electrical injuries can come from voltage being overexcited. Resistance to your personal body is going to end up not being able to handle any of that voltage. Therefore, the person should get electrical shocks and burns or electrocution in the worst case. So therefore, if there is an electrical component to your space, you're going to definitely need to start thinking about how to protect yourself electrically. That could be lockout, tagout. That could be some other, variable ways. Could be using other things that are more mechanical than electrical. However your team decides to address it, just make sure you look for some of those other hazards. Noises in some spaces might be even more pronounced because it could be just the simple configuration of the vessel walls and even surrounding locations if it's a construction site. So therefore you have to make sure that you're gonna protect your workers with some engineering controls if it's possible to do any sound dampening. If not, then you're gonna work with work rules. Maybe you could do the work when there's less noise, below 85 decibels, and then if there is still some noise hazards, then you're gonna think about PPE, but that's also going to interfere with your communication method for the workers, so you have to be aware of that secondary issue. And noise can cause a stressful situation as well, so make sure you're aware of that distraction and some of the other things that will happen due to noise exposure. Mechanical equipment and mechanical hazards can be some of those things listed there, so you have to look out for anything that could cause an amputation. It could cause maybe dismemberment in any way, or it could just be something that will end up hurting the worker substantially enough that it could crush bones or some other way that they could physically be harmed. And that's a physical hazard you're looking out for. And entrapment can also be, like I mentioned in an earlier module about grain. Grain silos are known to be something that can entrap a worker once they're in that space. Physical hazards can be thermal, noise, vibration, structural, corrosives. Those are all possible in a permit required confined space. So in this way, you have to make sure that you protect your workers against those. Another thermal effect would be heat and cold stress. So if you're working in a cold environment and you're doing a permit required confined space, now you have an additional hazard there, and the same with heat stress. So those are some of the other hazards. And you may even have hazards with the actual physical location that you're in. It could be falling objects, insects, animals, biological hazards. Could be unstable landing or surface areas. So all that extra danger has to be accounted for before the worker goes into those spaces. So therefore, the team that is doing the job hazard analysis, or the team that is reviewing the work that needs to be done in this location, they're going to have to consider all those other things that can hurt the workers, and then the secondary and tertiary problems that comes along with those initial hazards. So that is that brief summary of other hazards to be aware of in your permit required confined space. So with that, we're going to move on to our next section, which is Chapter 9, I'm going to do one specifically on working in hot environments. So that is a typical hazard even in cold weather, only because some confined spaces will increase the temperature, and also what you're wearing, the protective clothing, may also increase the temperature, rising the body temperature. So I'm going to focus in on that one next.